This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Forge fans, welcome back to the Forge Audio Network. I am your host, Mackenzie Barwell. I am so excited about today's episode because we have a matchup to talk about. Okay, I didn't realize how much I missed watching soccer at Tim Hortons Field until I was sitting there yesterday after 3 months of sitting in lecture halls. Yeah, you should be excited as a listener as well because I sat down with the CPL's Charlie O'Conner Clarke to discuss everything that went down yesterday and some things that Charlie's expecting going into Tuesday's second round matchup between Forge FC and Guadalajara. 11,500 fans in attendance last night. The atmosphere was so cool. Electric, if you will. I didn't know if I could get away with saying the word electric, but honestly, that's the only word that describes it. A friend of mine sent me a video from the stands yesterday, and this is what it looked like. So unreal. So unreal. If you were there, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you had as good of a time as it looked like in this video. Before next week's matchup, we will have another episode, but I want to dedicate this one to talking about what happened yesterday. And then eventually we'll get into some recent updates surrounding the team, including signings, the Pro Combine as well. But today, let's just leave it at my conversation with Charlie and I. Enjoy today's episode, and I will check back in next week. I think we're live. Let's continue. I appreciate you coming, though, since you got home so late yesterday.
I know. Hamilton, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a regular commute for you. I don't know what you're saying.
Absolutely.
How'd it feel to be back at old Tim Hortons Field in the middle of February yesterday?
You know what? It was weird, because I felt when we were on the way there that I hadn't been there in so long.
Yeah.
When I got there, I'm like, yeah, I was here yesterday. It's been like no time since the final.
I know. That's what Laura and I were saying too, because the last time we were all, I think, together would have been the final.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight feels like so long ago, but then we're in the press box and I'm like,
It's not really.
No. Okay, let's talk about the actual substance of the match. What did you make of it? And was the result something that you expected? Not even necessarily the score, but just how it played out, especially considering Forge have technically been in their short off season over the past 3 months.
Yeah, I don't think there were a ton of surprises in how this game played out. I mean, from minute one, you see Forge coming out, and it doesn't. We've watched Forge long enough to know that it doesn't matter what stage it is in the season. It doesn't matter who's fit or who they're playing against, where they're playing. If Bobby Smirniotis puts a team on the pitch, he's not putting that team out there to put 11 guys behind the ball and defend. Like he is putting his strongest team that he can out there on the pitch, and he's telling them to play football and to try and play out of the back and to attack, to try and score a goal. They did score a goal, and they scored a fantastic goal, which is a pretty good statement of this club's identity and how it wants to play football. And I think that actually did impress Chivas at times. But there's obviously the reality of a game like this against a team with the level of talent and the resources of Chivas, just the gap in just how much more money they spend on their squad and they're able to spend on their squad. You can see what a high level a strong Liga MX team is. And even though there was a lot of talk before the game about Chivas leaving, I think 5 of their top players at home, they still had 4 starters from their league game on Sunday. And they had 3 other players in their starting 11 that have started a game in the last month or so. Like, this was not a B team really by any stretch. And they had actually a lot of players in this game that used this game kind of as a statement to their manager. Fernando Gago just took over kind of at the end of December, and maybe things didn't start quite so well for them. They've been going a little bit better recently, but they have players, Cade Cowell in particular, who we're going to have to get to, who wanted to make a statement, and this game did clearly mean quite a bit to this team. So I think to see Forge come out and play the way they did and go toe to toe to them, especially in the first half, to see Forge get scored on and almost immediately come down the other end of the pitch and score a really, really beautiful goal.
Yeah.
Some really, really nice football is pretty much about as much as we can ask for in a game like this. You know, the performance was impressive for a team that hasn't played a competitive game in like 3 months, playing against one of the most difficult opponents they've ever faced.
Right. And I mean, they did have a few scrimmages over in Querétaro, but not to this, of course, extent.
No.
But like you said, they were able to execute. Forge had a plan, and Bobby even mentioned this in the post-game press conference. He said that's exactly how we wanted to score, and they were toe-to-toe, especially in the first 25 minutes of that first half. But based on how that went, and considering how possession-based it really was, would you have guessed that by the first half we'd have 3 goals scored?
Not really. No. I do think that, you know, maybe the first 20 minutes or so before Chivas scored is a little bit more, you know, these two teams don't know each other very well. They're kind of trying to poke at each other. Yeah, feel it out a little bit, see what's up. And even Chivas just kind of trying to get a little bit used to the pitch, used to the conditions, and trying to find where maybe they thought there were weak spots. And Forge, obviously, again, also trying to get into the game rhythm, which is kind of hard to do off the kickoff when you haven't been playing games regularly. But then, you know, a goal just changes a game completely. Chivas find a way through. It's kind of a giveaway through the middle. They break with such speed as they've been doing in their own league. They press and they win the ball. They get forward quickly and they score a really great goal. And all of a sudden, Forger, they don't really have time to feel it out anymore. It kind of wakes them up a little bit, and the game from there is just fully. This is a lot more open, because the Forge know now that they have to open up even more. They have to be a little bit more aggressive and score a goal. And then, you know, I do wonder what the second half might have looked like if, you know, Forge don't concede in the worst possible time, maybe the second worst possible time to concede in a game. And it's a really, it doesn't matter who you're playing against. You could be playing against Manchester City. It's still going to be frustrating to concede a goal in that way. At the end of the half, you might say a reasonably preventable moment where that's not going to be a highlight that Bobby Smirnotis looks back on and is happy to see. And especially just given the timing and given that they could have gone into halftime 1-1. But, you know, for the most part, I think Forge generally would have been happy with most of the way the first half went up until that very last moment.
Yeah. I was literally just going to ask you about that, and not to play the, you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda game, because even Bobby in the press conference mentioned that there, you know, isn't much you can do to reflect on that or what may have happened. But in terms of the detriment to conceding at that point in the game, you know, going into the locker room is going to look a whole lot different if it was a few minutes prior. You also talk about the speed and the pace of play, and we saw their press right out the gate. First whistle is blown, Forge has possession, but it's just like a herd. And I remember sitting in the press box being like, oh my gosh, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't covered the CPL for quite literally as long as it's been in existence, and also a fair share of CONCACAF matches. What do you see being the difference between, you know, a match of this caliber? And you know, same goes for the CPL, but what were some of the differences you saw in terms of maybe style of play or pace of play, as I mentioned?
Yeah, I think the pace is the biggest part. Like, you just kind of notice that the margin for error is a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Like, they're Forge and CPL clubs have the talent and the tactical ability to get results in games like these, but you really don't have any margin for error, and pretty much everything has to be, you know, as perfect as you can ask for in a football match. You see passes like the pass that led to the giveaway that led to the first goal. You know, anybody Banga can make that pass through midfield in a CPL game against some teams. Sometimes you get away with that, but you can't at this level because they are just reading the game a little bit more quickly, and they've got that bit more experience, and they're able to pick that off. And you just see how much more quickly, you know, they arrive to press. You know, if the ball comes to a player, he's got someone on his back immediately, and he doesn't have time to think about it, to take a touch, to turn, things like that. And you just see how quickly they can punish mistakes. You know, if they like, I think it was still the first goal. The midfielder gets the ball at the top of the box. He only takes one step to open up a bit of a lane into Cowell, and he flicks the ball through that gap into Cade Cowell, and bang, the ball's in the back of the net. It's just so quick how a game can turn on you against a team like that, where you can be very much in it. You can be going toe to toe. You've had your chances. You're playing well. You're possessing the ball. But one moment, one pass doesn't work out, or one defender gets beat just ever so slightly to open up just that little bit of space that they need, and they take it, they seize it, and they score a goal. And then all of a sudden you're chasing the game, and that's kind of the difference that you find in a lot of these games where you're playing a team where the caliber is so high and the quality that these teams are playing against week in and week out is so high. That's kind of what's so valuable for a team like Forge to play against and to learn, especially the younger players who maybe haven't seen that before.
Well, yeah. And we saw so many younger players step up yesterday. Mm-hmm. I want to hone in on Cade Cowell for 1 second, because I did not know he would come in with as much force as he did.
I mean, Cowell's a really interesting kind of figure of the last couple of months in Mexican football. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, Chivas have this kind of long-standing policy of only having Mexican players in the team. And obviously Cade Cowell, he has Mexican heritage, his mom is Mexican, but he grew up in California and he chose to represent the United States national team. So when he signed for this club, I think about a month and a half ago,
it was
pretty controversial.
Like a couple of weeks ago, right? Or even mid-January or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago. And obviously there are sections of this obviously massive Chivas fan base that were a little skeptical of this, or maybe weren't super happy about bringing in a player like that. But you see him on the pitch when he's given this opportunity. I think he only had one start in the 5 games or so they've played in Liga MX, but he gets to start here, which is kind of unsurprising. And you just see how talented he is. He's only 20 years old, and you just see how quick he is and how aggressive he is to drive through. And I mean, honestly, him being on that right side for most of the game, shout out to Malik Owolabi-Belawu, by the way, playing left back in this game, had his hands absolutely full, and I thought played maybe the best game I've ever seen him play for Forge. He was outstanding playing left back in this game. He had Cowell, pretty well covered for a lot of the game, but obviously, you see Cowell's kind of aggression and his pace being a little bit too much at times, and his ability to finish really well. I mean, the guy ends up with 2 goals that are both really, really nice finishes. And he's just a player that was very, very hungry for kind of a coming out performance for this club, because he wants to show that he can, be a big part of this team. And you kind of saw what it meant to him when he scored those goals. It seemed like kind of a weight off his shoulders as well. So again, that's kind of further proof that, Forge were not necessarily playing against a Chivas team that weren't interested, right? No. That didn't want this game, because you could see what it meant to them. And then Cowell, obviously, a player that maybe was a little bit better known to some MLS fans when he was there last year, but I think will probably be and develop into a really, really big part of this Chivas team.
Yeah, well, you talk about proving himself too. I think he's absolutely shown that he will be a part of that core roster. I mean, Malik, this is something else I wanted to get to, but you pretty much covered it there. It's such an insane position to be in, especially Forge having lost some really core defending players, and now a bunch of these younger guys being put in a position where they have no choice but to step up. And Coach Bobby did talk about it yesterday in terms of they've been training for this. They've quite literally been groomed for moments like these. But what did you make of not only his performance, but Chris Kalongo came out for an entire match after, to be honest, not having a lot of minutes in the regular season in 2023. And so for him to step up as well and make a couple great saves was really great to see.
100%. I thought Chris did really, really well. He looked very confident when he had to catch a ball would come in from outside the box. All 3 goals I think are really good finishes, and you don't really fault him. But for Kalongo, a guy who had coming into this game 3 appearances for Forge and only 2 starts, it is really impressive to step into a game like this and to do so confidently, and really play very well. And again, in front, playing behind a back line where it is a little bit makeshift, you might say. Both fullbacks are naturally center backs, and Dom Samuel and Malik. It was a bit of a certainly not a back four that you would have seen a lot in training last year.
not necessarily a conventional backline for the 2023 Forge FC. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And just playing against such talent and players who can get the ball off for a finish so quickly. You know, it's very impressive for Kalonga to come in and just look confident and composed in this game. You know, a ball would come to him, he would pick it up, he would catch it well, he wouldn't let balls spill unnecessarily, he would distribute the ball fairly well. He was pretty confident when Forge had to go back and cycle back to him, pass the ball back to him, he could get it out like that. So I mean, I think that was a very, very positive part of this game for Forge as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. To come in and not only play an opponent of this caliber, but just based on how naturally the game, like I said, was so possession based, and Forge is a team who likes to play through the back. So he and of course because of Chivas's press, he was so involved in the distribution piece. Exactly. And at first I was of course I'm in the press box just like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. But Nico said, who was in the press box, he is one of the best distributing goalkeepers by far. And 100%. So for him to show up with that confidence and also have to be involved in the way that he was incredible. And to show that kind of composure as well. Yeah, just got to give Chris his flowers on that part. But also something else that you and I talked about yesterday, rewinding here back to that first half, not very far in, Kwesi Poku goes out with an injury, maybe what looks like a hamstring pull, or that's just speculation. But
that's what it looked like, yeah.
Of course, Tristan Borges has to come in, and as we know, that's not necessarily a panic situation when Borges comes off the bench, as we've learned. But how important was it for him to step up in that role? Because we know that Kwesi is a different player, and they don't play it the same way, but Bobby asked Borges to stay wide, and he did do that, and I think we saw the outcome of that after that first goal. But what do you think he brought that maybe we would have seen something different, if that makes sense, if Kwesi would have stayed?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to look at in hindsight. I mean, first of all, I think the first thing we have to say is I really feel for Kwesi. That sucks that, you know, he came off at halftime in the final.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, and I didn't mean to overlook that as well.
He comes in here and like 7 minutes in, he's running for his life down the touchline. You can see him just kind of pull up in one step and just before he kicks the ball away, and he's immediately done. But
you can see the disappointment in his face too, eh?
And the poor guy just had a rough go. It sucks. Yeah. And I really hope that it's not particularly serious. I hope he can be involved, you know, on Tuesday when they're in Guadalajara. But Tristan Borges comes in, and it's very obvious that they're very different players. I think everybody who's watched this team at all can tell that. But you see the role that Borges approaches that play very differently to how Kwesi would have, right? I mean, the ball comes out to him out wide. Borges knows that he's not necessarily the quickest player on the pitch, but he's got that left foot that can wrap a ball in behind a back line, whereas Poku might have tried to take on a defender a little bit, make a little bit more space, and try to find Terran Campbell on the ground in some way or something like that. Borges knows that he can just take a couple touches and whip it around, and obviously credit to Terran for staying on side with that run as well, and trusting Borges to get that ball around behind him. But it is very different, and you do wonder if that, you know, how things might have been different if Poku had been on the pitch. Obviously, if Poku's on the pitch the whole game, he might be able to stretch things a little bit more.
Right.
They might use him as a different outlet to relieve pressure, because when just in the 5 minutes that he was playing and healthy, you could see how much he wanted to kind of just almost get lost in space out on the wing, because Forge would want to invite pressure over towards them and have him kind of out there on the wing where there's space, where there's no players, where maybe Forge are able to find him with a really long switch, and then he can play quite direct on a counterattack. So I think that was clearly a huge part of the game plan, but it's a credit to Forge that they were able to adjust on the fly and find a way to make it work with a very different attacking outlet in Tristan Borges, who, you know, again, it's not easy to come into a game in like the 10th minute when you've been warming up. You're like, I might come in the 60th, 70th minute, and you're kind of mentally prepared for that. You're not necessarily going into a game at 0 degrees Celsius in the first game of your year, being like, I'm actually going to have to come off. I'm going to have to warm up in 2 minutes, come off the bench, immediately play. And then, like, I think, 15, 20 minutes later, he's assisting a goal. So, credit to him as well for getting locked in so quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to bring that up in particular because those channels were so crucial out wide, and you talk about Kwesi wanting to literally get lost in that space, because I found when Forge did have possession, they did a really good job at shifting the ball and making Chivas run. I felt like they were very in control in certain moments. And even though the pressure was on, they did have players that were making the right runs, but coming back when needed and playing simple, but also making that space. You know what I'm talking about.
100%. And Forge have watched a lot of tape of this Chivas team. They would know that was what they wanted to do, that they could maybe create space for themselves by inviting that pressure, and just have to execute those balls out of danger, those long switches of play, which really is how they scored as well, with Ali Hijaberpour kind of getting out of pressure and getting rid of the ball at the right time, because his marker was right on his back, I think, when the ball comes off his foot.
Yeah.
So it was quite a well detailed game plan that they still had to adjust on the fly because of the change.
Do you expect to see anything different, or obviously we're not going to see anything too drastic, but going into this second round, what are you expecting?
I don't think I'd expect a lot of changes necessarily from Forge. I think maybe the tactical setup is a little different if it does have to be, if it's going to be Borges starting instead of Poku. Certainly there might be ways to get him on the ball more and maybe go through him a little bit more than having him be kind of the target out wide, because obviously Tristan's a guy that loves to have the ball at his feet to take on defenders, but also to play crosses and to play dangerous, incisive passes in. But I really don't know if there's a lot of massive changes. I do wonder, what Bobby's takeaway is going to be from Benny Badibanga's game last night. He was playing kind of a number 10 sort of free roaming role where he kind of drops back a little bit, goes searching for the ball. And he was playing quite brave. He made a lot of quite ambitious passes. Didn't necessarily work as much as he would have wanted it to, but again, that's kind of the nature of being so early in your season and not being fully sharp. I do wonder if maybe there's a change there where he's asked to be a little bit higher up the pitch more consistently to use a little bit more of some of his attacking skill set. But I think otherwise, I don't really think there's a ton of major changes that Forge are gonna look to make in this game.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's a great point about Benny, because that was a very untraditional role for him, especially Forge fans being used to seeing Kyle Becker or Noah Jensen in that central midfield. So yeah, I guess maybe not so much about changes, but more so adjustments in terms of how Bobby is with moving players around like it's chess. So we'll see.
There is a mentality adjustment too, though. Obviously, you go in playing away from home, 2 goals down. You don't really have anything to lose in the second leg, and that you have to score. At least, I think you have to score at least 3 goals to win this tie. So, I can see you don't want to go too aggressive at the start, and you're out of the tie by the 15th minute. But Forge are definitely going to show up on Tuesday night hoping to score a few goals. So that's kind of going to be fun to watch, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. That's also a good point. When do Cavalry play?
So they're the week after next. I think they kick off the home leg on February 21st. Because the first round of the Champions Cup is kind of split into 2 groups. So there's some of the matchups are going these 2 weeks, and then the rest of them are going the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I haven't heard much about that.
Yeah, it's a little strange. It kind of worked out for us at the CPL because we don't have overlap in our 2 matchups.
Focus on one at a time.
So that's nice.
Not the Forge fans, though. Sorry to bring up the enemy. Well, I mean, maybe not in this case, considering we're.
I don't know. I don't know if Forge fans are really cheering for Orlando. Maybe they are. If you just want your rival to lose, but
yeah.
I don't know.
No comment. Charlie, thank you so much again for joining me. I appreciate your insight. It's always a good conversation. Eventually, I'll be able to articulate myself as well as you. Okay.
I think we did pretty well.
One day, Charlie, one day.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please follow, subscribe, comment, and share.
Did you hear also that Chivas rejected the offer for the heaters on the bench?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Maybe there's some kind of miscommunication, but I looked down from the press box. I'm like, Forge's bench has a heater, and
Yes.
Chivas don't.
Apparently they had the option and they said, "Nah, we're good."
I don't know how that happens, and I feel like maybe something is miscommunicated there
Honestly,
or something, but like you see after the final whistle, they're all like all the guys come off the bench covered in blankets. I'm like,
yes,
not
because
like they're warm.
they asked, so I think they had said no one night, and then the next morning, or maybe it would have even been yesterday morning,
Yeah,
they requested blankets.
yeah.
Maybe they thought they could handle it, and then anyways.
Yeah, maybe they trained Tuesday night there. And
Yeah.
like, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.